were on, I'm not sure you're aware of this, you were on something known as the Unity Commission.
Yeah.
Which was a commission that came together. It was part of what I think Bernie leveraged a little bit.
It was the compromise after he gave. So just go back like 2 steps. As we went into the convention in 2016, Hillary did not reach the delegate count she needed to take the nomination, aside from superdelegates. They were counting the superdelegates and saying she won, but she had not reached that number, that magical number she needed at the time. And so what Bernie did on the convention floor was give his delegates to Hillary Clinton. And in that compromise, they agreed to have the Unity Reform Commission.
Right. And these are the type of things that you hear all the time. Like, sometimes it's like, make me Secretary of State.
Yeah.
Or it's, whatever, hire these advisors to do this. Or, this is not anything new. So the Unity Commission does reforms parts of the voting system. Part of it was, when the superdelegates come in and how many of them are and how many, can you have it all be lobbyists? No, there should be more electeds at the very least. And one of the other things was reforming the way they did the Iowa caucus, because there was this idea that it's not transparent.
Yeah.
People show up and then through a whole sort of sausage making machine where nobody takes, there are multiple steps, right? Mm-hmm. Thresholds that have to be met. People have to hit a certain percentage so that they can either move on in the sort of almost like it's a round robin tournament, or whether they go and support these people. None of that was transparent in the past.
And it's also confusing in the room. In 2016, in those crowded rooms where people were lined up out the door and couldn't make their way in because the doors shut, it was chaos. It was chaos. You didn't know whose camp. It was people were spilling over. The counts were inaccurate. The precinct captains were getting confused. And so we just wanted a tool to report how many people were in there. Now, I shouldn't say tool. I should say we just wanted the number to be released because they knew internally, or they're supposed to know internally, how many people were on the first count versus the second.
All right. So with that said, let's play this clip. Was this from MSNBC?
Yeah.
There is people are trying to come up with why the Iowa thing got so screwed up. It seems to me there's 3 things. Mm-hmm. One is they decided to have an app, and we've talked to multiple people.
They meaning Tom Perez.
Tom Perez said, "Let's have this app." So Iowa said, "Okay." 2 is that when the app broke down and people were trying to call in lieu of the app, the calls were flooded by some Trump fans. Apparently, 4chan did some stuff like that. But the third thing, what appears to be the case, is that the system in the sausage was always super nasty.
That's right.
Things were falling into that vat of sausage that nobody knew about. But once the transparency's there, people are starting to see it and go, gross.
That's right.
That's basically what happened. But here is the different story. Who is this?
It's Ruby Kramer, I think.
It's I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. Communications director for DNC.
Okay.
It's Sochi. I'm sorry. It's Sochi Hinojosa, who's the communications director for Tom Perez. Former, her father's the chair of the Texas Democratic Party. I can go down the laundry list of
nepotism.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. The nepotism
nice,
involved in this, but there's also a certain amount of CYA here because a lot of people have been calling for Tom Perez's resignation.
See the numbers. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that the changes, because after the 2016 really nasty primary in which a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters blamed the DNC and they thought somehow the DNC had rigged the primary so that Hillary Clinton got 4 million more votes. I'm not sure how they convinced those 4 million more people, tricked them into voting for Hillary Clinton, but somehow they rigged it. That's what they believed. And so Tom Perez, Chairman Perez, formed this.
Pause it for 1 second. Note the reliance on votes here as opposed to delegates. I think everyone responds to that notion of who got the more votes, right? Now, we have electoral systems, we have delegate systems, but that number is important in the context of this conversation.
Form this unity coalition commission that was comprised of a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters, some of whom a lot of Democrats had a problem, did not vote for Hillary Clinton and voted for Jill Stein, but they were still got to be on the commission. He went around the country.
Now pause it. Let's do a fact. Let's do a fact check here.
Oh my God.
You know everybody on that Unity Commission.
I know every single person on the Unity Reform Commission. The 21 people.
21. So that's a lot.
No, 21 people. 8 of whom were Bernie people. The rest were Hillary and Tom Perez people.
Okay.
So they make it sound like we ran this commission.
So no
in which
Martin
we were
O'Malley
minor.
people.
No Martin O'Malley
No
people.
Lincoln Chafee people.
No Lincoln Chafee
So there was a lot of Bernie people relative to how many people Jim Webb had on there.
Reflective of the delegate count.
Right.
So
okay. Now,
Yeah.
of those 8, was it 7 who voted for Jill Stein?
no,
Was it 8?
no.
9?
Maybe somebody else did. That was out of the.
Was it 6?
As far as I know, 0.
0.
0.
Well, I'm just asking because either they secretly told Joy Reid,
Yeah.
or they were public about it. And if they were public about it, you would know it.
Yeah. Well, one of them is supporting Elizabeth Warren now. The other is the the Nebraska State Party chair, Jane Clubb. One is on
Pushing
the, 2
the
are on
Green
the
Party.
DNC. One's a former mayor, me. I went out there and I campaigned for Hillary Clinton on TV and took that. So I lost like a third of my supporters. This is, but to pull back the curtain a little bit here, during the commission, I have a whole theory about this. During the commission in 2017, nobody would go to it. They had them in the basement of hotels.
Sure.
They'd announce the dates 2 days before. A couple of reporters would come in and out. TYT covered it for a little bit on air, so you can find those clips. But it was really not until the last day that there was any coverage. It was the C-SPAN.
And that's when you
dropped that bomb. Yeah.
Yes, I saw. I think we even talked about that at the time.
Yeah. So the commission went on for in total a year and a half, 2 years, but the commission part where you're touring around the country debating was for a year. I was not on the caucus committee, and I want to say that because there's a major point here. I was not on the caucus committee. Dr. Zogby was not on the caucus committee. We were on the Reform the Party committee where we talked about the budget issues and conflicts of interest. During this time when we were talking about conflicts of interest in the budget, suddenly this rumor spread from Neera Tanden, and it was echoed by Joy Reid online and on Daily Cost from certain actors that said that not only were the Bernie people trying to change primaries to caucuses, but that we had a white agenda, and it was pushed out by Ruby Kramer, who at the time was was pushing this narrative in BuzzFeed, and it just kept getting reiterated over and over, and then they named names, and it was Zogby and myself and Jane Clubb who were arguing for a reformed party and budget transparency and ban of conflicts of interest. I have not heard this argument since then. It got out of control. We got threats. They organized some sort of group.
And this
to
was a
come
way
after
to
us.
basically change the subject to get you off of what you were actually
right.
arguing on and
That's right.
and make you defend something that you had nothing to do with.
And we didn't, and like, just to be clear, we didn't have the power to do that. Number one, we were in the minority, so we didn't have the
Right.
power to do anything.
Right.
Number two, the commission only issued recommendations, and then they had to be voted on by the Rules Committee, which is all stacked with Tom Perez people. Number three, legally, the DNC can't even do that. A state decides through their legislature whether they're a caucus
Right.
or a primary. Caucuses are run by parties. Primaries are run by the state legislatures, many of which are Republican controlled. So let's just be clear. There are pluses and minuses to both. And that's what we learned through the process is that they're all screwed up. Primaries are screwed up and so are caucuses. Flash forward, here we are talking about this conflict of interest, this app. Here we are complaining.
Right. Well,
And
let's
then
hear a
back
little
on
bit
this.
more of this.
Yeah.
You guys were horrible.
Was comprised of a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters, some of whom a lot of Democrats had a problem, did not vote for Hillary Clinton and voted for Jill Stein, but they were still got to be on the commission. He went around the country, did this sort of national tour, and the rules that were made, that were set up, that created the caucus as it was this week, were created out of that. So Sanders' team had a heavy influence over it. Taking away superdelegates for a lot of African Americans, that meant black elected officials. Superdelegates are not magical beings. A lot of them are black elected officials, Latino elected
doesn't
officials,
agree with
people
us. I
of
know
color.
that.
It's the only power they had. That was taken away just to appease the Sanders supporters. And what we got was a mess in Iowa. So, there are a lot of, particularly African Americans, a lot of people of color who are very angry at Tom Perez and feel like he made these rules. The idea of buying an app to quickly count spending $50 million on an app to count.
Well, pause it.
quicker.
Wait a second. Now, there's a lot of people of color who are mad at Tom Perez. Like, I don't understand.
Her whole thing, she's taking in all of the smears of the Unity Reform Commission and just lumping them to one argument. So then when there was a superdelegate argument, it was really pushed by a group of white, old-timey DNC members who hate reform. And then they partnered up with a few women of color who were longtime employees of the DNC. And then Donna Brazile. And they pushed this narrative that superdelegates, we were disenfranchising women of color elected officials. Superdelegates are equal to tens of thousands of votes versus one person. It is not democratic. It is not represented. Most superdelegates, 65% are white men. So let's just be real here. Superdelegates are not reflective of this country that we live in, and that's a smear.
No way, just to appease the Sanders supporters, and what we got was a mess in Iowa. So, there are a lot of, particularly African Americans, a lot of people of color who are very angry at Tom Perez and feel like he made these rules. The idea of buying an app to quickly count spending $50 million on an app to count quicker. A lot of people are laying that at Tom Perez's feet.
Hold on, pause it for a second. Did she say $50 million? It was $60,000. Did she say $50 million?
She said $50 million. How is this person on TV?
Now, I will say, the Majority Report app, $50 million. So check it out. Continue. Is there any more to that? I don't understand what the heck is going on here. Did they not, what is going on at that place?
Yeah,
buying an app to quickly count spending $50 million on an app to count quicker. A lot of people are laying that at Tom Perez's feet. Marcia Fudge, Congresswoman from Ohio, saying
he was on the Unity Reform Commission. Marcia Fudge was on the Unity Reform Commission.
Well, there will always be a blame game, and the DNC is used as a punching bag. That is the reality. We're happy to take the punches. What we're doing is making sure there's a fair process.
But do you think the rules were changed in a way that made it more complicated, made it messy, and allowed this app situation to happen? Is that the fault of the party?
So first of all, we wanted transparency in this entire process, and that's why you've had the changes in the rules. And there were Hillary Clinton supporters, Bernie Sanders supporters, and state party officials who were involved in this process. It was voted on by 447 DNC members. That is the reality. Tom Perez can't wave a wand and make these decisions. There are DNC members that represent the entire party that do this, and they wanted to give a voice to the grassroots, and that's why there was more transparency, because people felt that for some reason the 2016 election wasn't transparent. So when it came to superdelegates, what was said is, superdelegates can vote, but we want to make sure that they don't overturn the will of the people.
Not that they did, because they didn't.
And they didn't, that's right. But because of optics, we needed to make sure that there was trust in our party, and we needed to bring the party together. After 2016, the most important thing we could have done is come together as a party and have unity. The only way we were going to have unity is to have transparency and make changes to the rules. We can't go into a convention divided. That will only help Donald Trump. And so that's what was Tom Perez's goal, and Tom Perez will be criticized left and right, but his number one focus is to beat Trump, and he wants to bring the party together in order to do that.
And I think that's clear.
All right, now, I mean, everything she said, I have no problem with it, other than I think that to a certain extent there's been a lack of competence by Perez, but I think I was talking to David Dayen about this yesterday. I think the bottom line is that often things that we project onto people that are ideological are really more about, I want to stay in a certain network that is going to get me paid.
And the thing with this is, what I find fascinating about this conversation is that I know for a fact that the messaging that Joy Reid is using right now came directly from Neera Tanden. She was the first person to ever say these things. She literally would go on Twitter and say, guys, this is what's going on. And then it would appear on Reddit pages, and then it was just sort of the official message. Of course, Neera is a Clinton person. Tom Perez is an Obama person. I think they don't have any problem throwing him under the bus. But what Chairman Perez was doing was he actually took this reform commission and fought for it to pass through the DNC membership, because he had a DNC problem. This wasn't even about Bernie in the end. This was about a DNC issue beyond Bernie support, because, DNC members, not that many are Bernie supporters, but a lot wanted reform.
Right.
And so the caucuses being more transparent, and the primaries, being more open, and getting rid of superdelegates. These were fights that were happening way before Bernie and Hillary.
I spoke to is it Christina Pelosi?
Christine Pelosi. She's a big advocate for budgetary oversight.
And she came and she was a very hardcore Clinton supporter. And I spoke to her at the 2016 convention, and she was like, "We're really trying to do this because we see the problem." And I will say this. Let's put a whatever we do to remember things around here, a Post-it note on what she just said, because I think the key has always been to me, and I'm quite convinced that that they would never ever do this, but it's tempting. And I understand that people leverage the superdelegates as a way of making seem like there's momentum. I am less convinced on some level about how that impacts the races in some ways. I mean, I'm less convinced about it. I understand.
We'll disagree there.
We can disagree about that. But,
Boomer.
but
Okay, Boomer.
the key to me is that to get public pronouncements that under no circumstances will the superdelegates vote for someone who has less pledged delegates. That to me is what do they call it? The Mangio line? I don't know. It fell anyways.
Maginot?
Yeah, Maginot. It fell anyways, right? It didn't hold.
Right.
But that to me is the one line that can't be crossed.
And that's what we were. Again, I wasn't on the superdelegate committee, but we debated it, so I was very aware, and we get updates. The second ballot, right? So she mentioned Marcia Fudge. Representative Fudge was on the Unity Reform Commission. She's from Ohio. She was a Clinton supporter. She was appointed by Clinton. Marcia Fudge was an advocate for budgetary oversight. She was an advocate for, she had a hard line on superdelegates because let's just be real, and this came up during the commission, they like feeling special.
Of course.
They're like super special. They get special hotel rooms. They get special
like a
speeches. She spoke at the convention. It is ego. And it isn't, there's nothing else to it other than ego. And that includes the DNC members who've been there for a very long time, who were part of the old guard, who don't like reformers, don't like leftists, didn't like Keith Ellison, didn't like Howard Dean at the time, don't like Howard Dean now. A lot of them are Clintonian. And frankly, I think, Tom Perez, if you were smart when stacking these committees, he would have gotten rid of the old-timey, Clintonian folks, because they're now ganging up on him.
Right.
And that was, frankly, it was a stupid move.
He does not have, I think, there's a certain lack of political savvy, I think, that he has on some level. I think I've heard very good things of him at the Civil Rights Division in the DOJ.
Yeah.
But in terms of like a political savvy, I haven't seen it.
He's never run a state party. And that's a big complaint that the state party chairs have, is this is somebody who fundamentally does not understand how parties work.
Right.
And that's a complaint I have about, the Bernie campaign in some ways, is that we have to get a little bit more savvy when it comes to how politics works.
Right. Sometimes you take the machine as it is, if you want to control it.
Yeah.
And you got to learn, you got to know where the levers you pull.
That's right.
You can't just say the lever should be over here. Right. Well, it's not.
You have to know that Sochi's father is the chair of the Texas party. You have to know where these relationships are. And it's something that we're trying to do on our show, but it's happening so quickly, it's hard to keep up. You have to,
let's just go back to the superdelegates, because I think this is really important. And I haven't seen, have you heard, whatever they said to don't come out and you can't declare, so far that feels like it's working.
It is, yeah.
I think part of that is because the superdelegates, to the extent that they don't want to support Bernie, and I would imagine that there's still a significant, a majority that don't, because, Bernie's not been part of the party apparatus. And again, this is one of those situations where it's like, if anybody's going to be in the loop, I'm not going to be in the loop if Bernie is the guy. Right. And
that's right.
And it's, the loop meaning I'm not going to get contracts, or I'm not going to get the good seats, or whatever it is for that person to be in the loop. And everybody likes to be in the loop, right? That's just, everybody likes to feel like they're important and that they know people. And, I can get into this bar. I know the bouncer, that type of stuff. It's all the same dynamic. It's just on a sort of in a different context.
We have the same thing on our side. Don't think that we're unique. There's a lot of that. It's human nature.
Of course. Yeah. And, but I haven't heard much about the superdelegates. And I think there was good pushback against the news organizations.
Yeah.
And now it just wouldn't work as well because of things like social media, where it's like people are going to say, look, they can't change the outcome.
Yeah.
They cannot change the outcome. They are not going to vote for a candidate that does not have the majority of delegates. Now, it's quite possible we can go into the second round of, the convention.
And they can do whatever they want, by the way, in the second round.
In the second round, they can do whatever they want, but it's still, I think they're inhibited by the fact that, like, we see you. Like, I think that what is more likely to happen is, like, everybody decides to go with Bloomberg. And Bloomberg wins by 1 vote.
Yeah. That.
And then the super delegates. But that's part of the convention. Now, I'm going to have a problem with that because I think Bloomberg is horrible. But I'm saying in terms of, like, the rules and following the rules and it being a fair playing field, to the extent that, like, of course they don't want Bernie. Of course they want somebody who is, like, going to get them the favors, going to get them the tickets. I mean, but it seems to me like everybody should be able, not everybody, but in every aspect of our lives, right? We want that guy who's like, oh, my uncle works at the Department of Public Works. He can get me a parking sticker.
That's
over
exactly.
there. I mean, this is all part of the
small to very large.
same dynamic,
Yeah.
different stakes. And I think so people should be able to understand this. It's like, whatever. My buddy works at the bar over at, at Crapgee's or whatever the bar is I go to, and he gives me free beers. Like, it's the same deal on some level.
The one thing I'll say is I think there are probably some superdelegates who have endorsed. This was something that we had debated because it's a free speech issue. And this was something Marcia Fudge and Elaine Kamarck, who was on the Hunt Commission and has written a lot, Elaine Kamarck has written a bunch of books on this, and she's a Brookings Institute fellow. And, she's a firm believer in superdelegates. She thinks that we're going to have another McGovern situation, despite the fact that I sat next to her and I kept saying, last year was the McGovern situation, Elaine.
Right.
2016
right,
was our
exactly,
McGovern moment.
exactly.
You didn't understand the electorate. But, they felt that there was a free speech issue. You could not say to Marcia Fudge, a congresswoman that earned that right, and there's a real sense of pride with these members, these specific members, that they couldn't endorse. I actually think there are people who are endorsing. I haven't looked, but I think what happened is we have a crowded field. It's too confusing. I don't think the press knows where to look. They don't even have the lists. It's not like Hillary Clinton is hand delivering it and you have this neck and neck race.
Exactly. There's nobody who has the time or the resources to actually sort of make that case.
Yeah.
And really, where would they all go right now?
Right.
I mean, if you were, like if I was a super delegate and I was like, Bernie Sanders will not be president of the United States, and I would say, like, I'm going to leverage my super delegate right now. I know in a million years I wouldn't know who to pick right now.
Well,
I would be sitting there going,
naive. These campaigns have delegate I mean, I hope Bernie has one.
Well, no, they have coordinators who are, but I'm saying, like,
those votes.
Somebody could be coming and lobbying me, give me your super delegate thing so we can stop Bernie. But I'd be so like, I'm worried about Joe Biden.
Yeah.
I don't see how Pete Buttigieg can do it. Amy Klobuchar, I mean, maybe, but what's she gonna do? Like, she's gonna like live in her bus. I mean, like what? Like she has no money. Warren and then Bloomberg. Like
I think Bloomberg is more of a threat than people.
I think Bloomberg is the biggest threat right now.
He has the Mayor's Association. He has all these
disgusting.
mayors supporting him.
He's not even a Democrat. He's not even a Democrat.
He's not even.
He was a Republican for almost his entire career. He was a Republican.
You're telling me, of course.
No, I know. I'm being facetious. I'm saying that that's like, where are all those people?
Yeah.
Remember when Bernie Sanders, like Bernie Sanders is not even a Democrat. Like as if it's like, who cares?
The irony is Donald Trump was more of a Democrat than Michael Bloomberg.
Yeah, he was. It's true. It's true. I guess, that proves it doesn't matter. I think the real problem with Bloomberg is he's horrible.